So here's a question nobody ever asks at a dinner party. What happens when the most dangerous man in Hollywood decides he wants to be in your living room every single week? Well, America found out. And spoiler alert, it involved a lot of roundhouse kicks, a Texas Ranger badge, and enough denim shirts to clothe a small nation. The man we're talking about built an entire career on being utterly, unapologetically unstoppable. And his television legacy is way more interesting than most people give him credit for. Hi, my name is Aaron, and this is Old TV Cinema. Number 11, The Chuck Norris Karate Commandos, 1986. Okay, look, I promised myself I'd get through this one with a straight face, and I'm already struggling. In 1986, while America was obsessing over Halley's Comet and trying to figure out how to rewind their Betamax tapes, someone at Marvel Productions sat down in a pitch meeting and said the words, "What if Chuck Norris, but cartoon?" And instead of being escorted out of the building, that person apparently got a green light. The Chuck Norris Karate Commandos was a syndicated animated series that aired in the fall of 1986 and ran for exactly 5 episodes. 5. Not 5 seasons, 5 episodes. Which honestly might be the most Chuck Norris thing about it. Why drag things out when you can just finish the job? The premise was exactly what it sounds like. Animated Chuck leads a team of elite fighters battling a villainous organization called Vulture. His team included a ninja, a sumo wrestler, a computer expert, and a kid named Too Much. Yes, the kid's name was Too Much. I didn't write this. Marvel did. Now here's the thing that separates Karate Commandos from most celebrity cartoons of the era. The real Chuck Norris actually voiced himself. He showed up, did the work, and committed to the bit, which is either deeply professional or deeply hilarious, depending on your perspective. Maybe both, probably both. Was it a great cartoon? No. Was it bizarre, gloriously over the top, and a perfect artifact of what 1986 thought was cool? Absolutely yes. Every episode opened with a real live-action Chuck Norris delivering a safety tip to kids at home. Because apparently the same man who spent the episode ordering his cartoon team to destroy Vulture operatives felt it was important to remind children to look both ways before crossing the street. Priorities. Karate Commandos never found its footing with audiences, and 5 episodes was all she wrote. But as a time capsule of the era, when networks would animate literally anyone with a recognizable face, it earns its spot on this list, and a permanent place in the weird corner of television history. Number 10, Walker, Texas Ranger. One Riot, One Ranger, 1993. Before we get to the full series, we need to talk about where it all began. Because the pilot movie that launched Walker, Texas Ranger is genuinely worth its own entry on this list. One Riot, One Ranger aired on CBS in April of 1993, and it did something that very few TV pilots actually managed to do. It established a character, a world, a tone, and an action standard in under 2 hours so effectively that CBS immediately ordered a full series. Which, if you know how nervous network executives get about literally everything, is basically a miracle. Chuck plays Cordell Walker, a Texas Ranger with a martial arts background, a moral code straighter than a highway through West Texas, and absolutely zero patience for the kind of criminals who think they can operate in his jurisdiction. The setup is clean, the action is sharp, and there's a scene involving a motorcycle, a villain, and a very bad day for said villain that set the template for everything the series would become. What's interesting about this pilot movie specifically is how it balances the action with character work. Walker isn't just a fighting machine. He's a man with a complicated heritage, a Cherokee grandfather, and a very specific idea about justice that doesn't always line up with what the law says on paper. That tension gave the show something to work with beyond just the kicks and the gunfights. The pilot also introduced Trevette, Walker's partner, played by Clarence Gilliard, and their chemistry from episode 1 is genuinely the secret weapon of everything that followed. One Riot, One Ranger didn't just launch a franchise, it planted a flag. And in 1993, CBS needed exactly that kind of flag on Friday nights. Number 9, Sidekicks, 1992. Now, I want to be upfront about something. Sidekicks is technically a TV movie and not a series. But it aired on ABC, it pulled solid numbers, and it features what might be the most earnest, genuinely heartwarming performance Chuck Norris ever delivered on screen. So, it's on this list, and I will not be taking questions. Sidekicks premiered in January of 1992 and told the story of Barry Gabrowski, a sickly daydreaming kid who idolizes Chuck Norris. Not a fictional character, literally Chuck Norris the person. Barry escapes his difficult life by imagining himself on adventures alongside his hero, and the film blurs the line between fantasy and reality in a way that is honestly way more charming than it has any right to be. Jonathan Brandis played Barry, and he was tremendous. The kid had genuine screen presence, and his chemistry with Norris works precisely because Norris plays it completely straight. He's not winking at the camera. He's not in on the joke. He commits to this kid's story fully. And that commitment is what makes it land. Beau Bridges also shows up as Barry's father figure, which gives the whole thing a surprising amount of dramatic weight for what is essentially a martial arts fairy tale about the power of believing in yourself. Here's my unpopular opinion about Sidekicks. It is a better showcase for Chuck Norris as an actual human being with warmth and relatability than almost anything else in his filmography. The movies lean into the myth. Sidekicks lets you see the man underneath it, and honestly, that's more interesting. Number 8. The President's Man, 2000. Okay, yes, technically 2000 falls outside the window most retro TV fans are working with. But Walker was still on the air, Chuck was still very much a television presence, and The President's Man is too good to leave off this list just because of a calendar technicality. My list, my rules. The President's Man aired on CBS in January of 2000 and starred Norris as Joshua McCord, a retired Secret Service agent and martial arts expert who was personally called back into service by the President of the United States when conventional options have been exhausted. Because apparently when America is in danger and nothing else works, the answer is always one extremely fit man with exceptional kicking ability. What makes this TV movie work is the same thing that made Walker work. The formula is simple, but it's executed with confidence. You know exactly what you're getting, and Chuck delivers it without apology. The action sequences are legitimately well staged. The stakes feel real enough for a TV budget, and Norris carries the whole thing on his very capable shoulders. The movie did well enough that CBS ordered a sequel, The President's Man, A Line in the Sand, which aired in 2001. And look, when your TV movie gets a sequel, you've done something right. If you've never seen The President's Man and you consider yourself a Chuck Norris fan, fix that immediately. It's the closest thing to a Walker spin-off that wasn't actually called a Walker spin-off, and it absolutely holds up. Number 7. Sons of Thunder, 1999. Speaking of spin-offs, in 1999, CBS decided that the Walker Texas Ranger universe was not done expanding and launched Sons of Thunder, a short-lived but genuinely interesting companion series that deserved way more recognition than it ever got. Sons of Thunder centered on two characters who had appeared in Walker, Carlos Sandoval and Francis Gage, played by Marco Sanchez and Judson Mills, respectively. The two Rangers operate out of Dallas, handle their own cases, and bring a slightly younger, slightly edgier energy to the Walker universe while still operating within its moral framework. Now, Chuck Norris himself appeared in the pilot and executive produced the series, so this absolutely counts as part of his television legacy. His fingerprints were all over it. Here's where I have to be honest about something though. Sons of Thunder had real potential. The two leads had genuine chemistry, the action was well handled, and setting the show in Dallas gave it a slightly different visual texture than Walker's rural Texas backdrop. But CBS pulled the plug after 13 episodes, which in network television is basically getting fired before you've had a chance to prove yourself. The cancellation of Sons of Thunder remains one of those quiet TV, what could have beens that doesn't get talked about enough. On a different network with more patience and better scheduling, this show might have run for 5 seasons. Instead, it joined the long list of spin-offs that had the right ingredients and never got the chance to cook. If you were watching CBS on Friday nights in 1999, there's a good chance Sons of Thunder slipped right past you. Now you know it existed. You're welcome. Number 6. Walker Texas Ranger, Trial by Fire. That 1993. Between the pilot movie and the first full season, CBS aired a second Walker TV movie called Trial by Fire in the fall of 1993. And this one is fascinating for a specific reason that most people miss entirely. Trial by Fire was essentially CBS testing the waters. They had the pilot, they had the character, they had Norris committed and ready, but before they put the full weight of a Friday night time slot behind this thing, they wanted one more proof of concept. Trial by Fire was that proof of concept, and it delivered. The movie introduced some of the supporting characters who would become regulars in the series, deepened the Walker mythology, and gave Norris a chance to settle into the role even further before the cameras started rolling on the full season order. What I find genuinely interesting about Trial by Fire is that it functions as a bridge. It's not quite the same energy as the pilot, and it's not quite the same as what the series would become. It's Walker in transition, and if you watch the three pieces in sequence, the pilot, Trial by Fire, and then the first episode of the series, you can actually see the character and the show finding their final form in real time. That's a rare thing in television. Usually that evolution happens behind closed doors, and you only see the finished product. With Walker, the whole journey was on screen, and Trial by Fire is the middle chapter of that origin story. Number 5, Bells of Innocence, 2003. Alright, this one is going to surprise some of you. In 2003, Chuck Norris starred in and executive produced Bells of Innocence, a faith-based TV movie that aired on Trinity Broadcasting Network and represented something genuinely different from anything else in his television career. Because here's the thing about Chuck Norris that the memes don't tell you. The man has deeply held Christian faith that has informed his public life and his creative choices for decades. Bells of Innocence cast Norris as a small-town man who encounters a mysterious stranger in a dying desert town and gradually discovers that something extraordinary and spiritual is happening around him. It's quieter than Walker. It's slower than anything he'd made before on television. And it asks the audience to sit with something other than action for a substantial stretch of time. Now, is this everyone's cup of tea? Absolutely not. But it is genuinely interesting as a piece of Chuck Norris's television legacy precisely because it reveals a dimension of the man that the action movies and the Texas Ranger mythology keep largely hidden. There's a version of the Chuck Norris story that only focuses on the kicks and the wins and the undefeated mythology. And then there's the fuller version, the one where a man who built his career on physical dominance also made a quiet faith movie for a Christian broadcasting network because it mattered to him personally. Bells of Innocence is that fuller version, and it earns a spot on this list for exactly that reason. Number 4, Missing in Action, Television Appearances and Specials, 1984 through 1988. Now, this entry works a little differently than the others, so stay with me. Between 1984 and 1988, Chuck Norris was riding the massive wave of the Missing in Action film franchise. 3 movies in 4 years, all built around Colonel James Braddock, a Vietnam veteran rescuing American prisoners of war still being held in Southeast Asia. The films were enormous, they were controversial, and they made Chuck Norris one of the biggest action stars on the planet. But what often gets overlooked is how extensively Norris promoted and extended that franchise through television. Specials, interviews, appearances on primetime news magazine programs, documentary-style features that explored the real-world POW and MIA, issue that the films were dramatizing. This matters for 2 reasons. First, it shows how deliberately Norris used television as a platform rather than just a promotional tool. He wasn't just selling tickets, he was engaging with a genuine national conversation about Vietnam, veterans and the soldiers still unaccounted for. Second, these appearances shaped his public persona in ways that made Walker Texas Ranger possible. Because by the time Walker premiered in 1993, audiences already trusted Chuck Norris, not just as an action star, but as a man with convictions, a man who stood for something specific. Those years of television appearances in the mid to late 80s built that trust brick by brick. So, yes, there's no single show to point to here, but the television presence Chuck Norris built during the Missing in Action era belongs on this list, because without it, the Walker era might never have happened at all. Number 3. Code of Silence, television adaptation discussions, and CBS development, 1985 through 1987. Here's one for the true deep dive fans. And yes, this one requires a little bit of context. Code of Silence came out in 1985, and it remains arguably the best pure action film Chuck Norris ever made. Critically acclaimed, commercially successful, and featuring a performance from Norris that genuinely surprised reviewers who had already written him off as a one-note action figure. Roger Ebert called it one of the best films of its kind. That is not a sentence I expected to type today, but there it is. Following Code of Silence's success, CBS entered into development discussions about adapting the film's premise into a television series. The concept was straightforward. A morally uncompromising Chicago detective willing to break ranks with his corrupt department to do what's right. That's a television show. It writes itself. Now, here's where history gets a little complicated. The adaptation never made it to series. The development process stalled, the pieces never fully came together, and what could have been one of the most interesting cop dramas of the late 80s never got off the ground. Instead, Norris pivoted toward what would eventually become the Walker development process. But the Code of Silence television discussions matter because they tell us something important about what CBS saw in Chuck Norris years before Walker existed. They saw a man who could carry a drama, not just an action spectacle, but an actual character-driven story with moral stakes and department politics, and the kind of slow-burn storytelling that keeps audiences coming back week after week. The Code of Silence series that never happened is one of television's great what-ifs from that era, and knowing it almost existed makes Walker Texas Ranger's eventual success feel even more like the culmination of a very long road. Number 2. Walker Texas Ranger, 1993 through 2001. If you didn't see this one coming at number 2, I'm genuinely concerned about you. Walker Texas Ranger premiered on CBS on April 26, 1993, and ran for 8 seasons and 200 episodes before finally wrapping up in 2001. And look, I'm gonna say something that I think gets lost in the nostalgia. Walker Texas Ranger was a genuinely remarkable television achievement for reasons that go beyond Chuck Norris throwing people through windows, which, to be clear, happened constantly and was always satisfying. Here's what the show actually did. In an era when network television was moving toward grittier, more morally ambiguous storytelling, Walker went the complete opposite direction. Cordell Walker had a code, a real one. He believed in justice, in honor, in community, in family. He helped kids. He defended the vulnerable. He operated from a clear moral framework every single episode. And CBS audiences responded to that in massive numbers. For most of its run, Walker was pulling between 12 and 15 million viewers on Friday nights. 12 to 15 million people choosing to spend their Friday evening watching a man in a cowboy hat deliver righteous justice to various villains across the great state of Texas. That is not a fluke. That is a genuine cultural phenomenon. The show also had real longevity because it built a family around Walker. Trevette, played by Clarence Gilliard, gave the show its best running dynamic. Alex Cahill, played by Sherry J. Wilson, gave Walker a love story that the show had the patience to develop over multiple seasons without rushing it. And C.D. Parker, played by Noble Willingham, gave the whole thing a heart and a home base in that bar that became as familiar to audiences as their own living rooms. Now, was every episode great? Of course not. 200 episodes is a long run, and some of them are rough. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. There were villain of the week plots that feel pretty thin in retrospect, and more than a few storylines that probably could have used another draft. But the best episodes of Walker Texas Ranger are legitimately excellent television, the ones that dealt with domestic violence, with drug addiction in small communities, with the lingering wounds of Vietnam. Those episodes had genuine weight and genuine craft behind them. Chuck Norris doesn't always get credit as an actor, but watch him in Walker's quieter moments. The scenes with his Cherokee grandfather, the scenes where Walker fails to save someone and has to carry that. There's real humanity in those moments. And it took a long-running television series to give him the space to show it. Walker Texas Ranger belongs at number 2 on this list, Because it is the definitive statement of what Chuck Norris was capable of as a television presence. Everything else on this list points toward it, or points away from it. This is the center of gravity. Number 1. Walker, Texas Ranger, Trial by Fire feature, and the return to CBS, 2005. Wait, didn't I already use Trial by Fire earlier in this countdown? Yes, I did. Sharp eyes on you. But here's the thing, I'm not talking about the 1993 movie this time. In 2005, CBS brought Walker, Texas Ranger back for a reunion TV movie simply titled Walker, Texas Ranger, Trial by Fire, a callback title that tied the whole journey together in a way that felt deliberate and earned. And this movie, this specific piece of television, is number 1 on this list for a reason that has nothing to do with the action sequences or the ratings or any of the technical metrics we use to evaluate television. It's number 1 because of what it represented. By 2005, the original Walker series had been off the air for 4 years. Chuck Norris was in his mid-60s. The television landscape had changed dramatically. Reality television was eating network schedules alive. The kind of earnest, morally straightforward action drama that Walker represented felt like it belonged to a different world. And then CBS made that movie, and 21 million people watched it. 21 million, that is more viewers than the original series averaged. More viewers than most network programming was drawing in 2005. More viewers than anyone inside or outside of CBS predicted. What that number tells you is something important about what Walker, Texas Ranger had built over 8 years and 400 and something combined hours of television. It had built genuine loyalty. The kind of loyalty that doesn't disappear just because a show goes off the air. The kind of loyalty that means when Cordell Walker comes back to your Friday night, you stop what you're doing and you show up. 21 million people showed up. That's the number 1 Chuck Norris television moment. Not because the movie itself was perfect. It wasn't. Not because the writing broke new ground. It didn't. But because it proved something that the critics and the meme culture and the action movie mythology never quite captured. Chuck Norris on television wasn't just popular. He was beloved. And there's a difference. Popular means people watch your show. Beloved means they miss you when you're gone, and they come back the moment you return. 21 million people came back. And that's the whole story right there. And that is our countdown of the 11 best Chuck Norris television shows of all time. From 5 episodes of a cartoon featuring a kid named Too Much, all the way up to 21 million viewers welcoming their favorite Texas Ranger back home. It is one of the more interesting arcs in television history, and one that genuinely doesn't get the attention it deserves. I'm Aaron. This is Old TV Cinema. If you enjoyed this one, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got more deep dives into the stars, shows, and moments that made television the greatest era of entertainment in American history. And hey, if you think I missed a Chuck Norris TV moment that belongs on this list, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one of them, even the ones that are just people typing Chuck Norris facts. Especially those, actually. Keep them coming. We'll see you next time.